Today we're discussing one of my favorite topics, the psychology behind buying a house. I'm joined by one of my good friends, Dr. Johanna Strokoff, a clinical psychologist, and we're going to be discussing why buying a house gives you the same stress response as a near car accident. Yes, I said that right. Buying a house may cause the same stress response as a near car accident, which is why this process feels overwhelming, emotional, and confusing. Today, we're going to be talking about why that home buying process is such an emotional roller coaster and the 3 psychological traps that sabotage buyers without them realizing it. Dr. Strokoff works with individuals and couples to help them understand their emotions, navigate life transitions, and build healthier relationships, including stressful decisions like buying a home. Today, we're breaking down this interview in 3 different pillars: the fantasy home trap, 2 visions under one roof, and FOMO paralysis. What viewers will learn is how to separate real needs from emotional triggers, how to navigate big decisions without spiraling, how couples can communicate and compromise effectively, how to avoid FOMO and make confident choices, and why you, not the house, will make a happy home. Well, I hope you enjoy this episode. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, hit the like and subscribe button. Johanna, why is this such a stressful time for both single buyers and couples buying a home? I mean, you would think you're buying your biggest asset that you're ever going to buy. It should be the most pleasurable experience, and then it ends up being the most anxious, driven, stressful decision or process ever. So can you please walk us through that?
So it turns out that buying a home is one of the most stressful life experiences. We have a lot of survey data on this that has purchasing a home to be ranked around or as stressful as planning a wedding, having a child, and experiencing like a really painful breakup. So it's right up there. And so why is this happening for so many people? Like when you said you thought it's going to be fun and joyful, well, what's happening? I just want to recognize that the logistics involved in buying a home really throw people off because they're working with professionals they've never worked before. You have your real estate agent, but then you also have a mortgage broker. You have a real estate attorney. You're working with professional inspectors. People are out of their bubble of comfort. And all of these professionals have different timelines and opinions. There's a lot of urgency once you start the process. You need to fill out this form in 12 hours. We have 36 hours to counter. We need to make a decision today, what we're doing. And most people don't love urgency. What urgency does to the brain is it signals that there is like a crisis. You know, we need to amp up. We need to respond to this very quickly. We have a part of the brain that's called the fight or flight center. It's the limbic system that is an archaic part of the brain, but vital for survival. When we see a perceived threat, the limbic system fires up and it floods the body with cortisol. It floods the body with adrenaline. This is why we start sweating. Our heart rate increases. We're ready to like lift the car up above our heads, to protect ourselves, which is great. We need that. This is also where the amygdala lives. The amygdala is where our emotions are, anger, sadness, joy, the raw emotion. But luckily, we also have a prefrontal cortex, which is a more advanced part of the brain. This is where we have things like reasoning and perspective taking and looking into the future and how we monitor the amygdala. So we're feeling anger, but it's like, how can I say this? How can I say this appropriately? When the prefrontal cortex recognizes that the fight or flight system is firing up, it moves to the side completely. It's almost like when you pull over for an ambulance to go by, like there's a higher need, there's a hierarchy. So the fight or flight takes over, the prefrontal cortex is offline. But what happens is the fight or flight really wasn't meant to stay on as long as it does. Our thoughts keep it going. So people are experiencing the fight or flight for days, weeks, months, which is incredibly unpleasant. They're not sleeping well. They're consumed by this. They don't feel good. They don't want to socialize with other people. It's very unpleasant. And what I think is also happening, So there's the logistics piece, which is overwhelming in and of itself. Then there's also some psychological pillars, some psychological themes that are happening unconsciously that are fueling the fight or flight to stay activated. Once we work through what they are, we can then name them and learn how to cope with them in a way that turns the fight or flight off and brings the prefrontal cortex back online.
It sounds like they should just hire a therapist for this process.
There you go.
Because that no, but
Or you
no,
can do that.
it's true though. Because like it
Does that
makes
make
complete
sense?
sense, and I really like how you were able to give us like at least the scientific background behind this stress response, because it's really important to at least understand it, especially in today's society, which we everybody wants to see, science or like data, right, to kind of back up
Yeah,
why
we're
they're
fascinated by it.
feeling this certain way. But yeah, that's great how you laid it out, and this is just a great outline for us to get started on what the issues are, what buyers are facing when they're looking for their dream home, and then you're gonna give them also some tips in this video, and on this whole series to help them cope with that. Johanna, let's get right into it. Our first pillar is the fantasy home trap, right? So first question, why are buyers today so convinced their home should deliver instant happiness?
The fantasy home trap is when we have a vision of the perfect home that we have been curating for decades. This is a fantasy where we enter into the home and we just feel this effortless wave of joy walking from room to room. That inner fantasy perfectly depicts who we are as a person, everything we love. And it's just, it overwhelms us, this idea that we're going to find the home that's going to check all of the boxes. And it's not even just for the home. We have a vision of who our neighbors are going to be, and we're going to be best friends. It's be like high five taking out the trash in the morning. And the kids are going to be really happy riding their bikes on the streets. And it's really this kind of happily ever after story, which is a lot of pressure to put on a home purchase. And it wasn't always like this. When we think about the history of the home over thousands of years and the need for shelter, for survival, it really was kind of, our basic needs had to be met. We had to feel safe from the elements. We had to feel comfortable and secure in a home base that was near other homes that gave us a sense of community. So, over time, those, needs and expectations really grew. Around the 1890s, the idea of the American dream started to be connected to a home purchase and owning land. And this was one of the first times that this idea of the dream being fused with the home came to fruition in American culture. Fast forward, the last few decades, our expectations for a home have really kind of skyrocketed, even among first-time buyers. Young buyers want a lot out of a home. They have expectations for square footage. We like larger homes now. There's expectations for a layout and what types of finishes we want and amenities. So we've come a pretty long way from really needing our basic needs met with shelter. And it's almost taken on this fairy tale idea. When we think about the general template for a fairy tale, it's usually someone who's experienced quite a bit of hardship, and they stumble upon this kind of Prince Charming type figure that whisks them away from their hard life, and all their problems are solved. And in this, fantasy, you live happily ever after. And so that is what we're placing onto a home. We're projecting all of our dreams and our hopes for how we want this next chapter to be. And of course, it's fun to indulge in fairy tales. I think a lot of us do it. But what ends up happening is when we're actually going through the process, there's a bit of a fall, a bit of a, it's a disappointment when just this effortless experience that we're really hoping to have is very unlikely to have in real life.
Yeah, 100%. It's, like you said, it's like they're going into the house expecting to have a certain feeling, you know. And it's like a relationship, right? It's like these things take work and time. Yes, I mean, we always suggest to have the buyers create a list of deal breakers or things that they really need, right? And as long as we're hitting most of what they really need, then they should move forward with an offer. But a lot of the times they get stuck in trying to find this dream home. This is why a lot of buyers out there in today's age are taking 6, 12, 18, 2 months. There's some buyers that I've shown properties for 3 years and they haven't bought a property yet. So
Wow.
it is
Wow.
and I'm not sure if this is like a new age thing, with the internet, and I know that we're going to cover that later on, or if this is something that other buyers had back in the 80s and 90s, pre-internet age.
So, what's really interesting is folks that are really wanting the house to check off all the boxes. And like you said, Paul, they're looking for a feeling. They're looking for an aha. And just like the fairy tale idea, the idea is that we just stumble upon it. We enter into it and we just know, this is home. This one is it. And for a lot of people, they don't experience the aha. That magical sensation doesn't happen for a lot of people. And I see this a lot in the work I do in therapy, where people are really struggling with this idea of, what do I do if I don't get the aha? What do I do if I feel like I have to settle? There is a great fear about people settling. Is this a good thing? Is this okay to settle? You see it a lot with parallels of like, is it okay to settle with my work? Is it okay to settle with the person that I'm dating? I work with so many people that feel like they have a good person they're dating, but they're settling because it's not that overwhelming sense of, aha, this is it. And so what I work with them a lot is like, who told you that we're never supposed to settle in life? Who taught you that we don't settle for the person that we end up with long term? Even when we love our partner, there's a lot that we have to settle on, and they have to settle with us. We're not perfect. We have qualities that are incredibly frustrating. So this idea that you should never have to settle, that it should always be great, is a myth. And it's really doing people a disservice because they're missing out on what is really good, but isn't perfect, because anything that's not perfect they view as they're settling for less than. And so if you're really looking for perfection in a partner or in a home, you're going to be looking for a while. Paul, it's like you mentioned, like people that are looking for 6 months or a year or 2 years, you're going to be constantly searching and missing opportunities that are really wonderful because it doesn't hit that aha fairy tale note or experience.
Yeah,
Out of it.
yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that. And there's so many different parallels between buying a home and also being in a relationship. That's why I raised my hand earlier, because I feel, I think people know this, like I'm single and I also have that same predicament. I don't want to settle. I'm older now, so I feel like I want this kind of certain thing. But I think consciously I understand it, but subconsciously there's some kind of pull there. So
Mm-hmm.
let's actually talk about the subconscious here, because this is why I'm
Yeah.
so excited to have you on the podcast. I'm really passionate about how the subconscious, drives 90 or even probably more percent of our decisions. So how does that play into this fantasy home trap?
So part of that is like, why is this fantasy so powerful that I can't seem to, even though I know on some level I'm asking for too much, why is it taking such a hold on me? And I think a large part of it is the fantasy gives you a false sense of reassurance that you're going to be okay, that it's going to be, a yellow brick road. Life from here on out is going to be great. You don't have to worry about a thing. You lived happily ever after. And there's a lot of anxiety that that may not be the case, that you're going to have bumps in the road. So the perfect home giving you the perfect life, that's really, kind of earth shattering or disappointing when you realize it doesn't really work that way.
Another thing that the fantasy home trap does is it serves as a distraction for everything emotional that's going on underneath the surface. So when we think about the timing of when a lot of folks are looking at buying a home, it's very common for it to be during a big life transition. Either they are getting married and they're thinking about extending their family, so they're moving from the city to the suburbs, for example, or there's a new job that's taking them to a new location, potentially a new state. There are really significant changes like going through a divorce or the kids getting older and downsizing. So these stages are, kind of rattling everything up inside. And most change, even if positive, is bittersweet. And most change alerts our vigilant part of the brain to be prepared. Something is coming up ahead, and I'm not sure if you're ready. So anxiety forms and emotions get stirred up. A lot of us, it's a very common tendency to want to push down what we're feeling emotionally, particularly if it's an unsettling emotion. So if we're pushing down our feelings of fear or sadness, like I'm really sad to be leaving a city that I really love, or I'm feeling sad about moving from bachelorhood to now starting a family, it really feels like I'm saying goodbye to part of my childhood in a way. And that's very bittersweet. It's almost like a grieving process of saying goodbye to the chapter I had before. When we're buying a home, it's really putting a stamp on something new and big. We're going to be there for a while. So when we push down things like sadness or even grief, anxiety says, I got your back. I'm going to fill this space and make the anxiety so loud that I'm going to be pretty good at pushing down the emotion. And anxiety usually needs something to hang its hat on. So the home serves that purpose. I'm going to have you fixating on the color of the cabinets and, what we should do with the kitchen, and really fixating on getting that 3-car garage, and what carpet should be put in, and is it okay that the wall color isn't what I want it to be? And it's really filling the space with a lot of noise in your brain. While it thinks it's doing you a favor, maybe in the short term it's just keeping you so distracted. What it's also doing is paralyzing you from moving through the process. We also know that we can't cherry pick which emotions we turn off and keep on. So when you're turning off sadness and fear and uncertainty, you're also turning off happiness, excitement, connection. And the more we turn off, the louder the anxiety needs to get to fill the space. So it kind of becomes this cycle, and the anxiety gets overwhelming. When we're actually able to shift and attune to what's happening underneath the surface, the emotion feels heard, it's released from the body, there's a catharsis that happens, and the anxiety becomes quieter because it's no longer needed in the same way. Oh, you're actually attuning to what's happening. I'm going to quiet down. This is when people get a sense of relief and direction that allows them to move forward.
It sounds like I need to have you on my buyer consultations every single time I talk to a buyer and a couple. That was so well outlined. I definitely resonated with that. So thank you for kind of taking us through like all those layers and how that anxiety, like once you can process all that anxiety, then you can kind of move forward. That's so
Mm-hmm.
important, and that's a great tip.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that obviously we're friends from over like 20 years ago on Semester at Sea. And the reason why I brought you on here because is you have a lot of clients that are going through this process, and
Mm-hmm.
can you explain some of like the bigger life changes that they're going through that you're helping them out with besides buying a home?
So much of buying a home, at least with a lot of my clients, are, starting families. They're moving from the city to the suburb, and it's a huge life change. And the magnitude of having a child, even though that's what they've wanted for a long time, is really scary for them. This idea that I'm going to have nothing left for myself, this idea that, I know that marriage is a commitment, but having a child is another level of commitment. Now I'm really stuck to this person for 18 years. They're always going to be a part of my life. Fears about, am I going to lose myself as I focus solely on a child? And a lot of even the first years of having young children, it really is a shift. I mean, you're so consumed with feeding schedules and sleep routines and bath time that there is this loneliness or this sadness of what you left behind. So they, in a way, it's what they want, but it's very normal to not really feel ready. It's the same thing that happens as your children get older and they're now processing their identity as being an empty nester. Like, what am I supposed to do? What is my worth? What is my value? Who am I? And who do I want to be in this next chapter of my life? It's not uncommon for people to be looking for homes as they're empty nesters, and they're looking for a long time because nothing feels right. They don't feel right in their own skin. This new identity doesn't feel right to me, so I don't feel home anywhere. So that's what, like, there's some examples where people feel
Yeah.
stuck, or they are taking their emotional sadness and they're wanting a home to fix that
Yeah,
for them.
yeah, those are all really good points. And I think what came up for me is identity, is changing identity in these big milestones in your life, right? From going from single to getting married, from getting married to having a kid, from having kids to getting a house, from having a house to being empty nesters, from changing houses. So these are all big milestones. And when you have these big milestones, it sounds like to me is that your identity is changing, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to process the grieving of the old identity, and saying, you know what, thanks for the last 10 years in the urban city, having fun with all your friends and doing all the fun things, and now you're going into a shift into the suburbs, having a different lifestyle, having kids, taking your kids to school, and that's really hard. And a lot of people don't think about how this is like how they're processing this. They're just going into it. It's all
Right.
conscious. They're not actually going into the subconscious or talking to a therapist and actually doing the work beforehand to help them make a better decision and move forward, I think, in a better way.
So it makes sense why they're
Yeah.
so overwhelmed, because the emotional journey alone is a lot and can be paralyzing, and people are distracted and they're not sleeping well, and they're not enjoying life the same way. And buying a home alone with all the logistics involved, both of those swirling together, I mean, it makes sense that this is consuming people way more than I think most people realize that it
Yeah,
could.
for sure. And we're talking kind of as a whole to more to like couples, which is a lot more complicated than just one person, like a single person looking to buy a house on their own. I think it's a much faster process. But when it's two people, it's two different identity shifts. It's two people making decisions, looking for this like fantasy home. So it's a lot more complicated now when you're making a decision with another person.
So let's talk about couples because couples are a lot of fun. I see a lot of couples in my practice. And Paul, my hunch is that you're seeing a lot of really interesting couple dynamics coming out as you're working with them through this process. Couples work is really fascinating because the dynamics are super intense, and couples have a way of just picking at each other and getting to like a trigger point faster than other people in our lives. Our partners and our families have us just really activated, like we're really sensitive to it. So what is happening is you have your vision that you've been nurturing and curating for decades of the perfect home and the happy life you're going to have. And when you're partnered with someone, almost always, they have curated their dream and their vision for the past few decades that does not align with yours. Typically, when we have our own original fantasy, in that, our partner loves all of our ideas, loves what we love, and they're so grateful. Thank you for bringing me this amazing home. When that doesn't happen, when it doesn't align with your partner, because your partner is not a carbon copy of yourself, there is a lot of defensiveness. What do you mean you don't like my dream? It triggers the fight or flight system of the brain that says they're coming after my vision. They're coming after my kitchen. I'm not giving up a part of my dream. And because our vision has been all that we've known, we view our partner's vision as really, really lame. I don't like your vision at all. Like, your vision is from another planet. How could you not love everything I love? It's almost confusing for the brain because it never occurred to us that we'd have to give up so much of our dream. And in the beginning stages, we're not ready to give this up. We're viewing our partner almost like a thief. Like, you're coming to steal, everything I wanted in life, which gets projected onto like a kitchen island. Like, don't come for my kitchen. Don't come for my wall color. What we're really feeling in that moment is, don't come for things that I think will make me happy. And what happens is couples start playing tug of war. The more I tug for my vision and my dream, the more my partner is going to tug back because they want them to bring themselves into the home too. When you have couples that are like measuring out if like their college couch will fit along the wall, they're saying, I want enough of me to be brought into this life. I don't want to lose part of who I am in this next chapter. I don't want to compromise on that. And a lot of times the way that we express our defensiveness, like we get short, we're not the most patient, we become critical. That way of coping activates our partner's defensive strategy. And now they are coming at us in a way that's, more direct or defensive, or they shut down. So we go back in this, we get caught in this loop of just defensive strategies back and forth when we're really feeling like disappointment and I don't get everything I want in this next stage.
100%. And there's so many different dynamics within that, right? It's like, who makes more money? A lot of times, the man just like, whatever my wife says, happy wife, happy life, kind of thing. But then they're always gonna hold some resentment at the end of the day if they're not speaking their truth, right? So let's talk about like how can we help people with this fantasy home trap? What are some tools they can use besides calling you and booking a session to help them kind of process the fantasy home trap and kind of move forward?
Okay, so let's talk about ways to cope with the fantasy home trap, your own individual fantasy, and how most of you are ultimately going to be let down by that. But you can still have a beautiful home and a beautiful life. And so we'll talk about coping with the fantasy part. And then we can talk about how couples can cope, because this is an opportunity for couples really to get stronger. This is a building opportunity. So the first pillar being that the fantasy trap is a wonderful invitation to go inward. When we have a lot of anxiety and we can't quite explain it, or when we have really intense emotions and we're like, this feels like an overreaction, it's a wonderful cue. We don't have to be afraid of it. It's a wonderful cue. Something's going on. Something wants to be listened to, and there could be relief on the other side. So what we want to do is gain coping skills for more emotional attunement. The first thing to do is to ask yourself, how do I tend to cope with my anxiety? And what types of emotions do I not like to feel? Usually a lot of our coping mechanisms are not going inward. They're avoidance strategies. They're looking outward. They're looking at details. They're being work focused. They're diving into things to do to move the body. And a lot of us have certain emotions for different reasons that we don't like to feel. Anger might be seen as a really cruel emotion. Sadness might be viewed as weak. There's different reasons why we feel the way we feel based on how our families expressed emotion and how our culture shapes what emotion is okay and which one isn't. So that gives you a cue. Okay, I've never really liked feeling sad. I wonder if there's some sadness underneath all of this. That's a cue for you. That's kind of giving you some direction. What could I be feeling underneath all of this? And once you recognize some of the emotions, how do I kindly and softly and with curiosity expand on it? Okay, I'm feeling sadness. It's okay to feel sad. Most people feel sad when there's a change. Emotions are healthy and wonderful. They just want to be listened to. So you kind of breathe into it. You slow down. You say hello. You kind of like befriend it. And then it's expression. How can I express this sadness? Do I need to cry? Do I need to call someone who's a wonderful support system? Do I need to go on a walk with a friend or a neighbor? There's also a ton of literature on the benefits of journaling.
I was
Like being able
just
to
gonna say that because I love to journal, something that I've been into for the last couple years, actually like more like 4 or 5 years. And I do it maybe like twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. But if I'm feeling something, I need to process it. Journaling is so amazing, and it's like it took me so long to get used to it, Johanna. Like I was like, why am I doing this? But everybody's like, just journal, just start to write your thoughts on paper, and you'll see the effects of it. And it took me probably like about a year of doing it consistently, where I started to feel the actual shift in the change of
Wow.
like letting out all my emotions. And it also just kind of helped me lay things out on paper so I can better analyze them. Because when you're in your head, it's just so confusing. It's just so congested in there. And when it's on paper, I can now let it out on paper, and I can process it much, much faster and much easier that way. So that's a great point.
There's a lot of power in what you said. I mean, our emotions and thoughts tend to be on feedback loops, and we get stuck on them and we replay them. And there's something very powerful about putting them on paper where they live. It's like it's the paper's almost bearing witness. It's seeing you, and it's a wonderful form of catharsis. It uses your brain in a wonderful way. You're writing. It's some movement. It is a very powerful way to cope and a way to feel without too much monitoring. You don't care how it's going to sound. You just split it. Just put it all onto paper. So these are ways to attune emotionally. There could be other ways too, if it's through art or music or dance or something that moves your body. This could also be a good time to expand your support network. If this is bringing stuff up for you, a really good therapist will help you discern how much of this is the house and the urgency of this decision versus everything else it's stirring up. And therapy can be a way that, in a similar way to journaling, you get it out, it feels good, and you get feedback about the themes of what you're feeling. A lot of what you're feeling today came from years ago. And being able to connect those dots, you can say, I know I'm feeling a lot of this today, but it's not really about the house. Let's not displace some of our stuff onto the house. It can kind of help break it up so that you're, looking for a house with more clarity and your emotions are in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Those are all really good. And when you said journal, I was so excited. I was like, yes, I journal. Thank you.
You journal. All right, Paul.
Yeah,
it's such
for
a good
sure.
one.
So Johanna, we've been talking about couples, right? And obviously you got 2 different identities, you got 2 different visions. what are some tools that you can give them to help them, I guess, compromise? Because this is all about compromise at the end of the day, so that they both feel good going into the purchase, and they're not
Mm.
holding any resentment moving forward.
This is such a great opportunity for couples to listen to each other, to compromise. Couples that accept each other's influence are happier. They're more satisfied. So when you said, there's some couples where it's like, I let the wife pick the home. I mean, okay, if the other partner truly didn't care, that's fine. But when it's a we journey, we picked the home, we decided on what felt good for both of us. There's something much more intimate about that. So while it's frustrating, it is really an opportunity to say, okay, I'll give in on this and this. You'll give in on this and this. We'll meet in the middle and we'll make it our own. So it really is a journey of compromise. This is also a journey of reassurance and curiosity about what is behind the intensity of what my partner wants. So what happens is, let's say someone is like dead set on the white kitchen island. And the other partner's like, this is ridiculous to get rid of an entire house because of one kitchen island. So usually saying that's ridiculous, that's absurd, that's stubborn, that's selfish, that doesn't fly very well with couples. That's not going to get a very good high response rate for positivity. A much better angle to go about it is to say, tell me what's underneath the kitchen island. What is it about the kitchen island that is so meaningful to you? What are you envisioning with this kitchen island? Now you're getting the story behind it. Well, I used to bake cookies with my grandmother, and we did it for a week at a time, and everything, you needed room for all the. Now you're getting the emotion behind it. And now you can say, oh, I love that. I want you to be able to continue cooking or baking cookies and teach that to our children. I love that. Of course you want that. Let's make that a priority. If it can't be a white kitchen island, maybe it's just a really good kitchen space that we can make our own over time, because I love your vision and I want you to have that. That is so different. You're kind of easing your way in. It's similar, who needs a 3-car garage? Like, that's absurd. Okay, here's another way to say it. What is it about the 3-car garage that gives you the vision of what you want in this home? Well, I feel really at peace when I'm doing my projects. That's how I decompress. I like to build things. I want our kids to build things. It's just really important to me. Okay, I want you to have that de-stressor also. It's such a cool hobby. It's such a cool talent. I love how handy you are. Let's make that a priority. Let's see what we can do. If we can't get a 3-car garage, I really want to commit to you still being able to do this because you love it. What if we took turns parking on the street and you had that second half of the garage fully just for your workspace? I want to honor this vision. I want to make this happen for you. We just have to be creative on how we get
I
there.
love that.
That is now, you like that? Now we're
Yeah,
joining
yeah,
the
for sure.
partner instead of pushing them.
It just you're just being curious. It's like, yeah,
You're
instead
being
of just like
curious.
meeting it with this wall of being like, oh, that's why. Like, I mean, just get curious. Why do you need this white kitchen countertop? Why do you need a 3-car garage? And get curious about why. I love that. I mean, I was just like smiling when you're saying that. It's
Yes.
like, this is great, because
Feels
yeah,
good,
for
doesn't
sure. I
it?
mean, it felt good for me. I mean, even though I'm not looking to buy a house, or I'm having these issues, but like I can see how that type of communication just brings their like energy
Yes.
down. They're more grounded. They can listen more. They're like, oh, and it also builds this like connection within the couple when they're having that conversation.
That's it. Because when we judge the other person, that's when their defenses go up. And that's when the power struggle happens. When we validate them and we see them, that's when we're ready to come to the table and let's make
Yeah.
a deal. That's when we are much softer. So much of it is your delivery and your communication. Another thing that couples need is a lot of reassurance that your needs matter to me. I'm not going to let you be left behind. So when I moved from the city to the suburbs, it was my husband kind of dragging me along. We were pregnant with our first child, and I was just terrified that I was going to hate it in the suburbs, even though that's where I envisioned having a family. And even though my husband was very thoughtful about, he's like, I think this neighborhood is checking off really how you want to live. You like to walk, you like to bike, you like the beach. It has all those things. But I was just I think I cried for like 3 months. I wasn't really a joy he's like, this is not how I want my wife to feel when I'm buying, when we're buying a home and spending a lot of money. But I needed his reassurance that if we give this 5 years and I'm miserable and I'm just, a skeleton of who I used to be, I need your reassurance that it's okay to pivot. You're not going to let me be miserable. And that's what he gave me. You being miserable does not serve our family in any way. You being happy is how this family is going to thrive. Couples need to give each other reassurance that we don't have to, we can pivot if it's not working. Now, 5 years later, I love our home. I love our neighborhood. I love our neighbors. I love our community. Don't tell him that. I'd rather him not know that he was right. But, I accepted his influence. I trusted his judgment. I know that he has so much of my interests at heart. I didn't think he was picking a home that was just great for him and awful for me. And so that was the type of reassurance we felt like we needed for me to feel comfortable saying, okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And it took time. And here we are. I probably like it more than he does.
I love that. That's a great example. Because what you're doing is that you're going into it knowing that he's got your back and that you're going to work on it together.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work out, you also know that he has already agreed to pivot if you're not happy, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're with a partner that's not happy, then you got to figure it out, right? Yeah. So Johanna, let's talk about our last pillar in this first video together, FOMO paralysis. And this is something that I have issues with, and we're going to draw the correlation of buying a home in today's internet age and comparing it to online dating, which is very, very similar. So the question for you is, why do more choices for buyers bring more overwhelm and more stress when they're looking to purchase a property?
So there was a really cool study that was conducted in 2001. It was pretty groundbreaking because it was looking at how our consumer behavior is altered by the amount of choices that we have. So what it did was it had people taste test jam at a supermarket, and then if they liked it, they decided if they want to buy it or not. And they put people into two groups. There was group A where people were given an option of 6 jams to choose from. And then there was group B where people were given an option of 26 jams to choose from. And the interesting finding was that the group that only were given 6 choices were more likely to purchase the jam. And the group with 26 choices likely got overwhelmed with how many options there were, didn't want all the brain power, they got overwhelmed with what would be required to make a decision, and they left without buying the jam. So it's probably a curvilinear relationship in that we want some choices to feel like we're able to find something that we really like. But when we're given too many choices, it becomes overwhelming because a lot of the choices are going to cluster together. It's going to be hard to decipher when you have 8 really tasty jams to choose from, which one you actually want. So people may experience this too, like when you go to a restaurant, if the menu is 80 pages long, you're going to be that person that's like, come back to me. Like, I don't know what I want yet. When you go to a restaurant where there's only 4 entrees, you feel pretty good about the entree you choose. Not only is it easier to make a decision, but you actually have higher satisfaction about what you chose. When given too many options, people might be able to make a choice, but they're more likely to second guess it or feel less satisfied because they know that there were so many options out there that maybe there was one out there that could have been
I was just going to tell you, I don't like going to Cheesecake Factory for that exact reason. I mean, their menu is so big.
It's so hard.
And you're right. It's like the more choices you give humans, they don't know what to pick. They're less satisfied. It'd be fun to get like a survey of like two different restaurants side by side, like a Cheesecake Factory type of restaurant, and then one that just serves like five different things, and see who,
Like a
yeah,
French restaurant
yeah,
where you
and
get
then
one
just see,
thing, you know.
like, what their experience is. But it's so true, and it also takes them so much longer, like you said earlier, to make that decision, right? If you give them too many choices, because they're always trying to pick what's going to satisfy them the most. So I totally get that.
And so and so much of, liking our choice is
Yeah,
psychological.
yeah.
If you were given too many choices, like there's so much that goes into it when you could be completely content. When you're given three options and you choose one that you like, you're lucky to have one
Yeah,
that you like.
and this is so pertinent now because we have so many options nowadays. I mean, you have a plethora, and not only buying homes or like dating, it's everything. There's just options
Yeah.
in every part of our life, right? And what I want to talk about is, before I started selling real estate, but when my mom started selling real estate in the 90s, every single month she would get a book. This is obviously pre-internet age. They would get a book of all the listings that were on the market for sale, and it's only once a month. So you'd only get, X amount of choices per month to go look at houses.
Mm.
You couldn't see the photos, you couldn't see the floor plan, there was no video, there was nothing, right? And then once the internet came out, now you started seeing all these new listings pop up. And nowadays on Zillow or Redfin, all the buyers have an automatic, notification that will pop up. They'll see all the photos of the house. They'll see everything. They'll see a video, see a floor plan, and so they get excited. And I'm sure when they get a notification of a new house that hits the market in their, in their search criteria, there's probably some spike of like, serotonin or whatever that like, hits them, right? And then they see the house, and then all the stories come in. So kind of let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm curious to see kind of like the mechanics of buyers when they have too many choices. I know we talked about, like a big menu overwhelm, but what are some of the mechanics around that?
And also, just to add what you're saying about how the internet floods us with so many choices, we also have so much more freedom to live where we want to live. We're in a remote world where people now are saying, I can live anywhere in the country. I can work from home a few days. And, so now it's not even just like, do we want this city? So I work with a lot of couples around that and families around that. Like, should we, should we go on an adventure or should we not? And it's how to, one option is saying no to the other
Mm,
3,000. And it's almost like a grieving process. When you say yes to something, you say no to everything else. But it's not that rigid. So if you pick a house and you're missing some adventure, where's your next
yeah.
vacation going to be? Like, you can, it doesn't have to be so rigid, but I think there is this kind of mourning period similar to when you find someone that you're going to
Yeah.
commit to. You're kind of mourning all the other fantasies you had in your head. you know I do that with clients too, and they're like, I found someone, I think this is it, but I'm kind of sad. And we kind of have a ceremony. We like say goodbye to the gentleman with the accents that we dreamed about for years, who was going to swoop in, and he flew planes. And we say goodbye to all these fantasies because we're choosing one, and you can only have one. For the most people, one home, that's what you get. There's also this idea of, there's a famous psychologist, his name is Barry Schwartz, and he wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice, where he talks about too many choices becomes problematic. And he has this cool idea that there are maximizers and there are satisficers. The maximizers are the people that are trying to find the best. Out of all the options, I want to find the best on the planet. Okay, that's a tall order. The satisficers are going through options and they stop once they find something that feels right. They're not trying to find the best, they're just trying to find something they like. And we can go through this process with a little bit more peace and perspective if we're a satisficer. They're happier with their choice. They take it, back in the day when you only had a month between packets, if you saw something you liked, you took it. Because if you had to wait a whole other month for the next thing to come out, that
Yeah.
house is gone. And you were lucky you got it. But it makes me think, like, during wedding planning, where all of this just spirals out of control, like picking a wedding dress can feel like climbing Mount Everest. You want the most, if you're a maximizer, you want the prettiest, most banging dress that has ever been created. So I was one of those, and I went to 7 bridal shops and I tried on like 80 dresses, only to find 11 that were all like an 8. And they were all really pretty, but now I'm spinning between 8 really good options. And I was stuck on this for months. My cousin went to one bridal shop and she maybe tried on 3 dresses and she picked one. And I was like, that was an option? She found one she liked. She felt good in it. She picked it. I was just so amazed that if you're not fighting for this concept of the best and you just stop when you find something you like, you're at peace with it. So you don't want to just, you want some options to feel like you have a say and this is a really good fit. But then you also want to feel content, like this is good. An 8 is good. Let's go for it. And then over time, we make it a 10, which, by the way, by the end, my dress was a 10. I added the earrings, like you build it up, you make it what you want it to be. But how distinct those processes were. And that mine was much more months of just indecision and angst. And I ended up going back to the first store I went to anyway.
So how does somebody become one or the other? Is that something that just comes through the way they were raised, or is it later in life? Like, how does one become a maximizer and how does one become how do you say that again? The word?
Satisficer? Yeah. I think a lot of it is what we're fed. We're fed this idea of the dream home. We're fed this idea of a soulmate. There's one person for us. And when you have that one person, you will have no doubt. That's what we're told. It's the same thing with the house. When you know, you'll know. You'll just know. Well, with this house, I didn't know. And with my dress, I didn't just know. There are a lot of things that you have to challenge this idea that maybe I'm not that person that's going to put on a dress and start crying because it's the aha moment. And that's okay. So you challenge this idea of perfection and you say, why don't I just really focus on what I like? I found a house that I really like. Could there be a better house in 6 months? Maybe. But likely it's not going to matter that much. Likely they're all hovering around and you're just kind of comparing apples to oranges. You have 3 great houses. They're all just so different. They're even impossible to compare. But they all have different strengths and really either one would probably be great. So you're challenging this idea. There maybe not be a home that sings to me or is a dream, but I just have to take something that is good and make it awesome.
So let's.
That brings me to
no,
the.
go ahead. I
Go ahead.
was just going to ask you. I was like, I think I'm ready for my therapy session because I know that we've talked about how this compares to dating, and I have this exact same issue where I feel that I'm 42 now. I'm looking to have a family and have a life partner, and I do put a lot of pressure on finding this like ideal, perfect partner that checks all the boxes.
Unicorn.
Right? So give me a therapy session on what I can do. I think this will also correlate to the buyers looking to find a house.
Okay. I work with a lot of people on this. They're dating someone great and they're thinking of breaking up with them because they're not feeling just butterflies every minute of the day. And they just have this idea that it should be handed to them. And they're terrified of settling and not having this, white horse experience. And so what we work on is what is really part of a healthy relationship? Someone that listens to you, someone that supports you, someone that thinks your vision and dreams are cool and you should go for it, someone that is emotionally attuned to you and will talk to you and will listen and compromise. These are all off the charts for the sexy meter with regards to like what a healthy relationship is. When they start getting into, well, they kind of talk with their mouth, they kind of chew with their while they're with their mouth open, and that grosses me out. Or, they spend a lot of time watching ice hockey, and I don't really have any interest in ice hockey. They're now talking themselves out of something that's really healthy. Because, once you're looking at someone and you're like, okay, they're great, but are they great for the next 40 years? They get really overwhelmed. They throw their socks on the floor. Like, I don't think I can deal with that for 40 years. And what I tell them is, you go for the good bones and you work on it for 40 years. Love is an action. Love is what you put into something. It's not something that you sit back and you go, oh, just soulmate, just fill me up. I want to feel great all the time. That's not realistic. That's not what marriage has ever been. If anything, this is now, now we're living in a day where there's much more combined interests and quality time spent together than ever in history. For thousands of years, marriage was, let's combine our lives, our livestock. Our families can come together. We can have offspring. And we're, through a lot of hard work, hopefully we'll have healthy children. I mean, that was marriage. Now we want, hot air balloon rides and just our equivalent. I want my intellectual equivalent. I want someone who's really sexy. I want someone who's athletic. Let's start with the basics. And then you're going to work on things within yourself to be more accepting about things that annoy you, to raise concerns when they come up so you can compromise. Hey, can we talk about a method for the socks on the floor? We're not looking for a smooth ride where there's no bumps. That's not intimacy. That's not commitment. Commitment is, I'm going to take you for who you are. You're going to take me for who I am. I'm not perfect. And we're going to work on it together. So that's the process. And I tell people when they're describing a really healthy relationship, keep going. Keep going. If there's something that's bothering you, try to work through it. Try to talk about it. And if there's a lot of anxiety about commitment, talk to them about it. See if they can be your safe space. This really freaks me out. Yeah, I'm freaked out too. It's a big, this is a big decision. It's the same thing with buying a house. You should be a little freaked out. It's a lot of money. Doubt is a healthy part of any big decision. When people say they have no doubt about who they're marrying, I'm like, really? Like, not even a little? I mean, I clearly had no doubt with my dreamy husband, but it is very healthy to have doubt. That is just your brain saying a big change is coming up.
Oh, I like that.
There's a big change. Are you sure you're thinking it through? I think people, when they have doubt, they think it's the wrong decision. Sure. And they get really freaked out. And it's not. It's just your brain being hypervigilant. Are you aware about the decision you're about to make? And you can talk to your doubt. I am aware this is a big decision. I've been very thoughtful about it. This is a decision that I'm confident in today with the data I have today. And I know that I can get through it, whatever happens in the future. I can't predict what happens 5, 10, 15 years from now. So you can almost soothe your doubt that this is a good decision, even though it's scary. And if we said no every time we had doubt, we would never do anything risky and we wouldn't have any growth. A lot of things we did in our lives that we're super proud of and that were awesome were also really scary. So it's redefining your relationship with doubt and redefining like what parts of me need to move in order for this to be a good decision.
Yeah. I really learned a lot about this doubt thing because like you said, when people start feeling that doubt, it's a red flag in their head. Instead of thinking of it as a red flag, think of it, oh, I'm going through a change right now. How can I process this? How can I look more inside to see what this is so that I can move forward? Because I have that same issue for sure.
How can I normalize that this is scary? That doesn't mean I'm not making a very thoughtful decision. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be an epic decision that will turn out like incredibly well. It's just slowing you down. And if we never had any doubt, we would be doing a lot of stuff that would be very impulsive. So that wouldn't be good either. This is like trying to be our friend and just slow us down. But it doesn't need to ignite the fight or flight as intensely as it does.
Joanna, how can buyers move forward when they're terrified of the regret of picking the wrong home? Because I think that's, again, with dating or picking a home, they don't want to make a decision because there's probably something better coming along the way in the next couple weeks, couple months.
So there are a few things you can do when you're flooded with these choices and you're really nervous about making the wrong choice. Am I going to have regret? One is just to understand that all houses are going to come with something, just like people. At some point you're going to have to redo the roof and there's going to be this or that. And, so do I think that there's a lot of classic examples of like a horrific house? Probably not. You're using your real estate experts to help you make a sound decision. Rely on them. Listen to their advice. They are not pulled in the same cycle of internal chaos the way you are as a buyer. Do they think this is a good investment? Why do they think this is a solid choice? That if you had to pivot in 5 years for whatever reason, you'd be able to sell it. Like there are options. So I would rely on them when the anxiety is kind of clouding me. There are also some other things to do to get you out of this FOMO paralysis grip that is so strong. One that I recommend is, for me, I removed forever home from my vocabulary. That just wasn't a thing that I connected to. I ain't in the market of a forever home. I'm going to give this a try for my life and what I think it's going to be like, over the next few years. I can't predict what I'm going to want or what may happen in the future. So removing forever from that title, I think eases the grip a little bit of this has to be the perfect home with no regret. Removing forever home, might as well remove dream home while we're at it. I'm looking for a nice home to start the next phase of my life. Another thing is just gaining confidence in your resilience. You can pivot and you can make the home be what you want it to be. You are the one that invests in your neighbors and, your hobbies and how you're going to decorate the home. You're the one that's capable of that. You are resilient. You can make it work, particularly if there's 5 good options and they're likely to all be hovering around the same kind of attractiveness to which home to buy. They're all going to be good because you're going to fuel it with that. Something else to keep in mind, there's also a concept called an impact bias. Impact bias is when we tend to overestimate the power and the impact of a decision. It's all or nothing. Either I take this job or I don't. If I take this job, it's going to be amazing. If I don't take this job, it's going to be horrible. This is the biggest choice in my life. We overestimate that impact. Likely, if you have 3 nice homes to choose from, it's really not going to matter. The impact is going to be fairly minimal. And we'll never know. You don't get to live in all 3 simultaneously. But it's kind of this idea like wherever you go, there you are. We fantasize that, a new home will mean a new life, but you bring yourself with you. So just to tame, this, what if I have this all the regret? You're likely going to be fine. It's likely not going to impact your life as much as we think it will because we're vigilant about the impact of change. And I'm going to depend on my resiliency to help me through. I'm not a big regret person. I think we have data. Bad things happen. We adjust, and it gives us just more knowledge to move forward. There's little, what can we get from regret? We knew what we knew at the time. We made the best decision, and at least I went for it. So I'm going to use the information I have now, and I'm going to go for it. If it's truly paralyzing, it's been, you're not sleeping for 6 months, take a break. Decompress. Get a good therapist. Unhook yourself from it because something else is holding you down that's just blocking you. But until then, try these other things first.
For sure. I don't think any buyer is going to be buying or putting an offer on a house, which takes a lot of time and effort, if they're at some point going to regret it because they obviously liked it for some reason, right? There's probably some other underlying issue why they're not happy in this house. And like you said, wherever you go, there you are. That's a good example because at the end of the day, the inner
Hmm.
happiness just comes from you. It doesn't come from anything outside of you. Obviously, you want to be in a nice home, right? And again, you have
Right?
you have your criteria, maybe a big open kitchen so you can host and a few other things. But at the end of the day, a house really isn't going to give you so much more happiness, right?
When I ask clients, describe to me your childhood home, the ones that say, I had a really sweet childhood, I loved my childhood home, they're not saying, I just loved the soft close feature of the kitchen cabinet, or I just loved having laundry on the second floor. They're not saying that. Kids don't care about that. What they say is, we had so many memories in that house. We had Taco Tuesday, we had game nights, we had holidays. What they're saying is it was filled with a lot of love. So the irony is, whatever home you buy, which is likely a sound decision if you trust your real estate agent, whatever home you buy will be your kid's dream home if you're fueling it with love and connection and memories and creativity and just, letting them be kids. You're giving them the dream home and it will become yours too. You just have to give it time. It doesn't have to be instant. You will make it what you want it to be.
I think that's a great example because when I think about my childhood home and what it brought to me, again, it's all the memories. It's like all the childhood parties, the quinceañera for my aunt, the pool, which it could be any pool, right? The front yard, it could be any front yard. The basketball court can be any basketball
Right?
court. The neighbors, I'm sure there's
Exactly.
great neighbors everywhere as well. So that's a really good way of kind of thinking of your childhood home. It's not about the home, it's about the relationships within the home, your mom, your dad, your siblings, and the memories you guys and the love you guys created within that home, which could be any structure. You can just move that family into some other structure or some other place, and they're gonna have the same
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly. So just relax through it. Relax through it. You're going to build something beautiful if that's where your energy goes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Anything else about the FOMO paralysis that we need to cover with these buyers in terms of how can they get past this and move on?
I think just naming these
Yeah.
concepts, trying to simplify the process, trusting your realtor when they take you to certain places, that there's a reason they didn't take you to the other five. Challenge these, we live in a more is more society, and challenge that. I don't have to tap into this craze that everyone's in. I can have a simpler approach to this. I can have some good options and welcome some peace that I'm going to create a foundation and a new chapter is going to come that could be really
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, and I think most of these buyers are unconscious of how this is affecting them or how it's happening in real time because the subconscious just it's automatic, it's so quick, and it's so powerful,
Powerful.
right? So I think by understanding that you're going to be going through this process when you're looking to buy a house with your partner or alone or with whoever is at least understanding it. That's step one. Step two is once you start to feel that the doubt or that
Exactly.
energy or that anxiety, okay, I'm safe, I'm okay, let's journal, let's talk to a
Exactly.
therapist, let's walk through this. Let's communicate with my partner what I'm going through, so you guys can build more connection, understand each other, and then start to continue to feel. I guess you may not feel good right away, but I think over time, if you
Right.
work on these things and you're conscious about that, it's going to happen at some point when you're looking at a house. You're going to be going through these like pulls from either direction. Is now okay, I understand them, I'm okay, I'm safe, and it's not about the home. Like I'm going to be happy wherever I go as long as I have the simple things, the 4 bedroom, the 3 bathroom in a safe neighborhood in a good school district. That's really it.
Yes. 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 And then we are the secret sauce.
I like that.
We're the secret to all of this. The energy we put into it is what we will feel back.
I love that. I love that. I think we can end on that point. That was beautiful. Thank you, Johanna. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wealth of knowledge regarding what buyers are going through when they're going through this big milestone of buying a house, right? This is not the only video. We're doing another 2 videos, so I'm super excited to have you back on. Next video will be on sellers and what they're going through, because I know sellers go through a lot, saying goodbye to their home of 10, 20 years. A lot of it is more like empty nesters, right? So they're having to leave behind all those memories. So that's a huge mourning process. So I'm excited to hear about how you can help those sellers move through that process in a better way. And then our last video is going to be about trust sales. I do a lot of trust sales here in the Los Angeles area. When somebody passes, now it's the house is given to the siblings. There's a lot of money at play, and so when there's a lot of money at play, there's just a lot of weird energies going back and forth. A lot of siblings not agreeing with things. So you'll be giving them tools on how to handle those transactions. Yes, so
Can't
excited.
wait.
All right, I'll see you next
so
time.
much.
Bye, Johanna. See you later.
Sounds great. All right.